Well, at least the plan, at least we think the plan, is that Rishi Sunak is running what is believed to be an 80-20 strategy. Now, this is you pick 80 seats where you think you are going to really compete well. And then the rest of the 20 is you're going to sort of compete against them and be really marginal because it was quite close. Uh, you know you can win. You might have even won them in the last election. You might have only just narrowly lost them. So we don't know what those seats particularly are going to be because obviously they're not going to tell people what those seats are going to be. But those, at least of what we have heard, is meant to be the strategy. That's the strategy Sunak is going for, this 80-20 strategy. And then, of course, as always, Conservative Home did a recent poll along with their cabinet poll, which they always sort of tend to do, asking sort of the party questions. What do you think about this? What do you think about this? And, who's in, who's out, etc. And they asked a very interesting question. Do you think we should be targeting Labour seats? Now, I'm not really sure what they meant by Labour seat. Do you mean current Labour seat? Do you mean former Labour seat? Do you one that you took in 2019 that it doesn't like you're going to hold? So there is a very interesting situation developing at the moment of a very much disconnect between who is the leader of the party, the parliamentary party, and of course the non-parliamentary party. I mean, you've got this almost trifecta of we don't know what we're going to do. But as someone said in the comments to this, let's just get this over with and just take the absolute electoral kicking that we deserve. So we'll find out what happens. But I want to dig into this because obviously Henry Hill, who's again one of the big sort of writers over at Conservative Home, did a sort of a piece about this and sort of responded to about this and wondered, is the 80-20 strategy really worth it? But we'll find out in a moment. But before we do get onto that, please do remember to click on the like and the share button. If you're new to the channel, click the subscribe button. Down below, there are links to my Patreon page, the notification link, come buy me coffee, where you can buy me coffee, the YouTube thank you button. Of course, there's the YouTube Pony Club as well, the YouTube subscription that you can sign up to as well. And of course, there is a weekly video for the Patreon members and the Pony Club members every Wednesday that we do for you, as well as access to all the past Pony Club video content we did as well. So let's crack on into this then, shall we? So this comes, as we always do, over on to Conservative Home. The title of our survey: 2/3 of Conservative members think that CCHQ, that's Conservative Party HQ, is wrong to be targeting Labour seats. So last week, I reported that the Conservatives had adopted an 80-20 strategy. And this was their fight for the upcoming general election. That means digging into their 80 most marginal seats while also throwing resources at 20 of the most marginal seats that they ran with other parties closest in 2019. As Will Atkinson then noted, this is an appalling tactical decision. Whilst it might have been justifiable just a couple of years ago when the first reports of it emerged, it now bears no retention to the desire of the state of the polls today, most of which suggests that the Tories are heading for a worse defeat than their very annus horribilis in 1997. And oh boy, we have seen the polls. As usual, crazy outlying polls sometimes. None of the polls have really sort of settled about how big this Conservative defeat is going to be, but they can all agree that it is going to be a Conservative defeat and it is going to be a big defeat. You've even seen a poll which would leave the Conservatives with just 4 seats. Now, I've said, I think when you look at it, I think it could be anywhere between, 120 to 80. I think it's going to probably be somewhere around there. But like I say, there are plenty of polls which suggest they would lose potentially even more than that. So, hey, we'll find out on election night how close I am in those predictions. Maybe they'll lose even more. But I've always said the more seats they lose, the bigger trouble that they get into. And of course, as we said, this opens the door to huge, interesting possibilities. Of course, the fact that maybe the Lib Dems suddenly become the main party of opposition. to who knows what may happen. But ultimately, this wipes the slate from the Conservatives, with them just being absolutely wandering the political wilderness for at least the next decade, fighting amongst themselves for who knows how long. Um, and that time gives us a lot of stuff that we can get done. So, like I say, think big picture when it comes to that. So, back to this though. So, in that election, the party just picked up 165 seats, and in 2019, it won 365. Even allowing for the erosion of the Conservative Party majority over this parliament, CCHQ could easily throw its entire budget at the defensive contests that have still have enough to try and shore up every front now under threat, which, of course, is the problem. Engaging honestly with the reality of the party's current position would mean having to make some very politically painful choices, and it would require Rishi Sunak to dig his trench in such a way as to abandon a large number of MPs and, most obviously, the Red Wall out in no man's land. That would not do much for the parliamentary party's already fraying discipline. And would he do that? Is he really, as we said here, going to dig his trench and then the Red Wall just gets left out in no man's land? Does he focus on the homelands, which, if he does that, then immediately the party discipline goes shot completely? Because if you're being a Red Wall MP who's being abandoned, why do you have to be loyal now, right? There's all kinds of stuff that could happen if this goes ahead. There are no way is Rishi Sunak going to do that, because that would require leadership. And as we've said before, Rishi Sunak is not a leader in any way, shape, or form. He has never shown an ounce of leadership in his entire, leading the Conservative Party. He has been terrified to exercise any chance to really do anything of leadership quality or make a hard decision. So that ain't gonna happen anytime soon. So, there isn't, of course, there's zero prospect of Tory gains. Just as in 2017, it may be that the Scottish Conservatives do pick up a few from the ailing SNP, even as the National Party goes backwards, but not as if CCHQ has picked 20 Scottish targets. Yeah. While it might be very difficult for Sunak and his colleagues, it would be very obvious to be in the best long-term interests of the party. Not only is it now throwing resources at an impossible defense, not going to save those seats, but it could also be the big difference between victory and defeat in once safe seats, especially in the so-called blue wall, where the primary challengers are the resurgent Liberal Democrats. And this is what I find kind of funny, because a few weeks ago, we talked about the fact, or at least the fantasy of one of the writers on Conservative Home, that Labour's going to win this big majority, and then everyone's going to see that Labour are just a big disaster, and that the Conservatives are somehow going to sort of come back and win in the next election after that. And I have to say, do you really think people are going to sort of forgive you for everything thereafter? Not only that, from what we can see at the moment, Labour are in no way going to be the biggest, continuous, failures that this party, this Conservative Party, currently has been. Not only that, they're going to be far too busy fighting amongst themselves to really, actually engage in maybe even a proper political sort of push. And then I also raised the point, and Henry Hill brings it up here, resurgent Liberal Democrats, because why then, if Labour turns into such a failure? So let's just think this. If you are a Conservative voter and you have had it with its current Conservative Party, and you're going to go, well, tell you what, we'll give Labour a chance. And then let's say Labour just turned into an absolute disaster. Not likely. Who then are you going to pick? Well, your likelihood is either A, you may go to Reform. That is certainly a possibility. Or, more likely, you are going to go to the Liberal Democrats. And this is what I would say as well, that if this sort of scenario did happen as played out by that Conservative fantasy, it's not the Tories who would benefit, it would be the Liberal Democrats, and the Liberal Democrats would actually then have to be prepared to potentially once again take power. And that would be very, very interesting to see what would happen with the Liberal Democrats, how they would change, which direction they would sort of go in. So who knows? But we'll see. So, whilst many of the seats lost to Labour may likely be regained, Sir Ed Davey's party are unlikely to make the mistake of returning to office anytime soon. Absent that, their MPs could hold on to seats won at the election for decades, which is very, very likely. You know, it's going to be very, very hard to unseat some of these Liberal Democrats who are going to win these sort of conservative safe seats. And then I also like it how, if that applies to Lib Dems, Henry, why does it not apply to Labour if they win those seats as well? Just saying again, this fantasy of somehow, oh, we can beat Labour in 5 years' time. The party is not going to be in any fit state, to be honest, in 5 years' time, because they are going to be tearing at each other in just constant civil wars, unable to really define which direction they want to go in, and they're just going to completely fall to pieces for a very, very long time, which will be great for us. So there you go. Once again, a bit of conservative, coping on that part. So. And it is therefore no surprise that our panel now overwhelmingly opposes the 80-20 approach. Fully 2/3 of those surveys think that the Tory HQ should concentrate its resources effectively on defensive battles, versus barely on the 1/5 who now favour taking the fight to the opposition parties. Obviously, members don't set the strategy, but one does wonder whether the party might actually find it challenging to redeploy activists from seats that it and only it officially deemed safe to campaign in its fantasy marginals. So we'll see what happens there, but ultimately doesn't look like the 80-20 strategy would work given sort of the poll ratings. Even the current membership does not like an 80-20 strategy. And they've said, look, instead, just go and defend the heartlands. Like, defend the seats that are most defensible instead of fighting a general election on an offensive way. Just fight in the seats that you know you can win and that you can stay and stick and hold, because you can devote a lot of resources then to that defense. Will they change strategy in that time? Who knows? But Henry Hill does make a good point. Why are these activists who have already been deployed, suddenly sort of go back or suddenly start to fight in marginal seats? Not only that, what does this say to the sort of the future Conservatives who then got abandoned in many of these ways? They're not going to be happy. And I'll tell you this now, post general election, I can see a faction, a non-parliamentary party faction forming of those red wall conservatives who got really angry about being abandoned. They are going to go, oh, look, they say that that trying to win these seats is pointless. Well, we proved them wrong in 2019, and we were abandoned by Rishi Sunak. If we only had the money to sort of fight in these seats, if we'd only been supported properly, we could have won. I would not be surprised to see some sort of faction appear in that way, in sort of the non-parliamentary party. But we'll see what happens in the wars to come. So, as they always say, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.